She stole from your mother, Nathaniel.
I never I look terrified.
Who erased the footage, Vivian?
You're trusting a maid over your family. I was searching for someone.
I never stopped looking for you. Stop believing I buried the truth.
Nathaniel Cross stepped off his private jet expecting a quiet ride to his family estate. Instead, he found a maid in a grey uniform surrounded by security at the edge of the runway. His sister said the woman had stolen from their mother and tried to run. But the maid's sleeve was marked with blood, her hands were shaking, and the fear in her eyes did not look like guilt. Then his mother whispered, "Don't let them take her. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments." 3 days earlier, Nathaniel still believed money had kept his family safe. For almost 12 years, he had lived in California, far from the old Cross estate outside Charleston. He had built a biotech empire from a borrowed office, 3 exhausted employees, and one idea everyone had called impossible. Now investors waited for his calls. Hospitals used his company's technology. Business magazines called him a billionaire with a conscience. Nathaniel never liked that phrase. It made him sound better than he felt. Because the truth was simple. He had not been home enough. He called. He sent money. He paid for nurses, renovations, medical equipment, and anything else his mother needed. When Margaret Cross suffered a minor stroke several months earlier, Nathaniel offered to fly home immediately. Vivian told him not to. His younger sister had said it gently the way she said almost everything. "Mom needs calm right now, not panic. I'm here, I've got her." And Nathaniel believed her. Vivian had always been the steady one. She had stayed in Charleston while Nathaniel chased laboratories, investors, patents, and boardrooms. She managed the family estate. She oversaw the Cross Foundation. She handled Margaret's doctors, medications, household staff, and legal paperwork. Every time Nathaniel felt guilty, Vivian made it easier. "You're doing your part," she would tell him. "You built the life Dad wanted for us." So he wired another payment, signed another authorization, approved another budget, and told himself that care could be arranged from a distance. The private jet landed in Charleston just after noon under a pale, humid sky. Nathaniel sat near the window as the runway slid beneath him. His assistant had scheduled a board dinner that evening, a foundation review the next morning, and a private visit with Margaret in between. He had planned the trip carefully. Too carefully. Not like a son coming home, like a man fitting family into a calendar. When the jet door opened, warm air rushed in. Nathaniel stepped down the stairs in a dark suit, one hand brushing the rail, his phone already buzzing in his pocket. At the bottom, Vivian waited beside a black SUV. She wore a cream coat despite the heat, her hair pinned neatly back, her face composed. Beside her sat Margaret in a wheelchair wrapped in a soft blue shawl. Nathaniel's chest tightened at the sight of his mother. She looked smaller than he remembered. Her silver hair had thinned. One side of her face still carried the faint heaviness left by the stroke. But her eyes found him at once, and for a second the airport, the staff, the waiting car all disappeared. "Mom," he said. Margaret tried to smile. Before he could reach her, a sharp voice cut across the tarmac. "Hold her there." Nathaniel turned. 2 security men were standing near the service vehicle parked behind the jet. Between them was a woman in a grey maid uniform. She looked exhausted, with dark hair pulled back too tightly and one sleeve stained near the cuff. She was not fighting. That was the first thing Nathaniel noticed. She was only trying not to fall apart. Vivian sighed as if embarrassed by the scene. "I'm sorry you'd had to arrive to this." Nathaniel looked from Vivian to the maid. "What's going on?" The taller security guard answered first. "This is Elena Morales, sir, household staff. We caught her trying to leave with property belonging to Mrs. Cross." Elena lifted her head. "That's not true." Her voice was low, but it shook. Vivian stepped forward, her expression softening in a way that made the moment feel even worse. "Elena, please. Don't make this harder." The maid stared at her, wounded. Vivian turned back to Nathaniel. "Mom's antique bracelet is missing. The gold one Dad gave her. And Elena was seen near Mom's private medical files this morning. When Paul questioned her, she panicked and tried to leave the estate." Nathaniel felt the old instinct rise in him. Protect the family, control the damage, trust Vivian. He looked at Elena more carefully. Her shoes were worn at the sides, her uniform was clean but faded. There were shadows under her eyes, the kind no sleep could fix in one night. I didn't steal anything, Elena said. One guard tightened his grip on her arm. Margaret made a small sound. Nathaniel turned toward his mother. Her eyes were no longer soft with reunion. They were wide, wet, terrified. Vivian noticed too and placed a hand on Margaret's shoulder. Mom, it's okay. We're handling it. But Margaret shook her head. Barely. A tiny movement. Elena's right hand moved toward her uniform pocket as if checking something hidden there. Nathaniel saw the motion. So did Vivian. Vivian's face changed for half a second. Then it was gone. Elena, Vivian said quietly, give them whatever you took. Elena's lips parted. I can't. The words landed like confession. The guards moved to search her. Margaret suddenly leaned forward in her wheelchair, trembling so hard the blue shawl slipped from one shoulder. Nathaniel rushed to her side. Mom? She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her mouth worked slowly, painfully. Vivian bent closer. Mother, don't upset yourself. But Margaret kept her eyes on Nathaniel. Then she whispered, broken and breathless, don't let them take her. The tarmac went silent. Nathaniel stared at her. Elena stopped moving. Vivian's hand froze on the wheelchair. And as one guard pulled Elena's hand away from her pocket, something white slipped halfway into view. A hospital bracelet. Nathaniel saw the printed name before Elena could hide it again. Margaret Cross. His mother's name. Nathaniel did not move at first. The hospital bracelet hung halfway from Elena's pocket, white plastic against grey fabric, small enough to miss if he had not been looking directly at it. But he had seen the name. Margaret Cross, his mother's full name printed in black ink beside a patient number and the hospital logo. For a moment, the whole tarmac seemed to hold its breath. Vivian recovered first. That belongs to my mother, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Elena, why would you have that? Elena closed her hand around the bracelet before the guard could take it. Her face had gone pale, but something changed in her eyes. Fear was still there, yes, but beneath it was a hard little spark, the kind a person found when they had nothing left except the truth. I didn't steal it, she said. The taller guard tightened his grip, then handed over. No, the word was small but it stopped everyone. Nathaniel looked at her. Why do you have my mother's hospital bracelet? Elena swallowed. Her eyes went toward Margaret, then back to Nathaniel, because she gave it to me. Vivian let out a soft breath almost like pity. Elena. It was not sharp, it was worse than sharp. It sounded disappointed, like a woman watching someone ruin their last chance. She has been confused lately, Vivian said to Nathaniel. You know what the doctors said after the stroke. Some days are better than others. She misplaces things. She gets frightened. She attaches meaning to objects. Margaret made a strange sound from the wheelchair. Nathaniel turned quickly. His mother's fingers were curled around the armrest. Her mouth trembled as if the words were trapped behind something invisible. He had seen weakness before in hospital rooms, but this was different. This looked like panic. Mom, he said softly, kneeling beside her. Did you give that bracelet to Elena? Margaret stared at him. Tears gathered in her eyes. She tried to nod, but the movement broke halfway. Vivian placed a hand on Nathaniel's shoulder. Don't pressure her. Please, Nathaniel almost accepted that. The old habit was there. Vivian always knew the doctors, the schedules, the medications. She had been the one living through the hard parts, while he had watched from conference calls and airport lounges. But Elena's breathing was getting uneven. Not guilty, cornered. Let her speak, Nathaniel said. Vivian's hand slipped from his shoulder. The guards hesitated. Elena took one careful breath. Mrs. Cross was upset this morning. She kept pointing to her wrist. She wanted me to take it off. That makes no sense, Vivian said. Elena ignored her, but it cost her. Nathaniel saw it in the way her jaw tightened. She said someone changed her room after she came home from the hospital. She said papers were missing. She said she needed proof that the hospital dates were real. Proof of what? Nathaniel asked. Elena looked down. That was when Vivian stepped in front of her, not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough to break the line between Elena and Nathaniel. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Vivian said. She has been spending too much time with Mom, filling her head with worries, making her suspicious. I didn't want to say it before you arrived, because I know how it sounds, but Elena has become attached in a way that isn't healthy. Elena's eyes flashed. Attached? Vivian looked at her with sad patience. You needed this job, we understood that. I understood that. I even asked Paul not to report the first incident. What first incident? Nathaniel asked. The security guard named Paul stepped forward. He was a broad man in his 50s with a hard face and a radio clipped to his belt. 2 weeks ago, sir. We found her outside Mrs. Cross's office after midnight. She said she was bringing tea, but the cabinet with the medical binder had been opened. Elena shook her head. Mrs. Cross called for me. You're not a nurse, Paul said. No, Elena answered, her voice breaking. But sometimes was the only one who came. The words landed harder than Nathaniel expected. Vivian looked away for a second, only a second. Nathaniel saw that too. He rose slowly. Where is the bracelet Vivian says was stolen? Paul opened a small evidence pouch. Inside lay a gold bracelet, delicate and old, with a clasp Nathaniel recognized immediately. His father had given it to Margaret many years ago. Margaret had worn it to every formal dinner, every charity event, every anniversary. Seeing it sealed in plastic made something in his chest twist. It was found in Elena's locker, Paul said. Elena's face crumpled. No, that was not there when I left this morning. Vivian's expression softened again, but her voice stayed steady. Elena, please don't make us drag this out. No one wants to call the police. I told Paul we should handle it privately. Nathaniel turned to her. You weren't going to call the police? Vivian shook her head. Not if she gave everything back and left quietly. I felt sorry for her. She has a difficult life. Her brother is sick. From what I understand, medical bills can make people desperate. Elena looked as if she had been slapped. Nathaniel watched that reaction closely. Shame, anger, pain, but not surprise. So it was true. She had someone sick, someone depending on her. He looked back at the bracelet in the pouch, then at the hospital bracelet in Elena's hand. One was a family treasure everyone could recognize. The other was disposable plastic, something most people would throw away without thinking. Yet Elena had refused to give it up. Why risk everything over that? Nathaniel asked quietly. Elena looked at him then, really looked at him. Her eyes were tired, deep-set and red around the edges. A woman who had worked too many hours. A woman who had not had the luxury of falling apart. Because your mother told me not to let Vivian have it. The silence changed. It became colder. Vivian's face did not move, but Nathaniel felt the shift in her before he saw it. The warmth drained from her eyes. For the first time since he had stepped off the jet, she did not look hurt or patient or kind. She looked afraid, only for a heartbeat. Then she smiled sadly. That is a terrible thing to say. Margaret began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a thin, broken sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her body. Nathaniel turned toward her, and the sight nearly undid him. His mother was staring at Elena like she was trying to protect her from across a distance she could not cross. Nathaniel stepped between Elena and the guards. No one touches her until I understand what happened. Paul stiffened. Sir, with respect, this is an internal security matter. It's my mother, Nathaniel said. It's my house, and it's my decision. Vivian folded her hands in front of her. Nathaniel, be careful, you just got here. You don't know what she has been doing in that room. Then show me. Vivian blinked. What? The footage, he said. You said she was seen near the medical files. You said she tried to leave. Show me the CCTV footage. Paul and Vivian exchanged a quick glance. It was small, almost nothing, but Nathaniel caught it. Paul cleared his throat. Of course, sir, we have the main hallway footage. The main hallway? Nathaniel asked. Paul nodded. Yes, sir. Nathaniel looked from Paul to Vivian, then down at Elena's closed fist around the hospital bracelet. For the first time since landing, he felt the ground beneath his polished shoes turn uncertain. Good, he said. Then let's see all of it. Paul's face tightened. Vivian's smile held. But Elena whispered, so softly only Nathaniel seemed to hear it. There was another camera. There was another camera. The words settled heavily between them. Nathaniel kept his eyes on Elena. She looked exhausted, cornered and painfully aware that nobody wanted to believe her. Yet she had spoken anyway. Paul's jaw tightened. What camera? Nathaniel asked. Elena hesitated. The one outside Mrs. Cross's private office, she said quietly. The one facing the side hallway. Paul answered immediately. That camera hasn't worked in months. Too quickly. Nathaniel noticed. So did Elena. Vivian stepped forward before either of them could speak again. This is getting out of control, she said softly. Mom needs rest, Nathaniel. You've been traveling all day. Let's handle this calmly. Normally, he would have listened. Normally, he would have accepted her judgment, but his mother's frightened eyes kept replaying in his mind, and so did that hospital bracelet. "No," Nathaniel said. The words surprised everyone, including himself. "We're going to the security room right now." Paul looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the staff can handle," I said now. Silence followed. A few minutes later, Nathaniel stood inside the estate's security office. The room smelled faintly of coffee and electronics. Rows of monitors covered one wall. Paul sat at the control station while Vivian remained standing nearby, composed as ever. Elena stood near the door, not because she was welcome, because Nathaniel insisted she stay. Margaret had been taken upstairs by a nurse after becoming visibly distressed. Nathaniel hated leaving her. But something told him the answers started here. "Show me everything from this morning," he said. Paul pulled up the footage. The first recording appeared. A hallway outside Margaret's room, timestamp, 6:42 in the morning. Elena entered carrying a tray, nothing unusual. Several minutes later she emerged alone. The video continued. She walked toward the administrative wing, then disappeared around a corner. Paul paused the screen there. Nathaniel frowned. "There what?" She entered the restricted area. Nathaniel looked again. The footage only showed her walking, nothing else. "Continue." The video resumed. Several minutes later Elena reappeared. This time she was moving quickly, one hand pressed against her uniform pocket. Paul froze the image. That's when she took the bracelet. Elena shook her head. "No." Nathaniel stared at the screen. Something felt wrong. He couldn't explain it. Not yet. "Where's the footage from the side hallway?" Paul's fingers stopped moving. That camera was offline. "You checked?" "Yes." Nathaniel held his gaze. Paul looked away first, a tiny detail. But Nathaniel noticed. Years of boardroom negotiations had taught him one thing. People often revealed themselves in the moments between words. "Show me the maintenance reports." Paul blinked. "What?" "The maintenance reports." "Sir, I don't think now." Paul reluctantly opened another file. A list of repairs appeared. Nathaniel scanned it, then paused. The side hallway camera. Maintenance completed 3 weeks ago. Status. Operational. Nathaniel slowly looked up. The room became very quiet. Paul swallowed. Maybe the report wasn't updated. Nathaniel's voice hardened. Maybe. No one spoke. Then Elena did, "I told you." Her voice wasn't triumphant. It was tired. The sound of someone who had spent too long not being heard. Nathaniel turned back to the screen. "Recover the footage." Paul hesitated. The system may not have retained it. "Try." More silence. Then Paul finally began typing. The recovery software started searching archived files. Progress bar, 1%, 2%, 3. The wait felt endless. Nathaniel glanced toward Elena. For the first time he noticed how worn her shoes were, how thin the fabric of her uniform had become, how exhausted she looked. Not lazy, not careless, exhausted. He remembered Vivian mentioning a sick brother, medical bills, desperation. But desperation alone didn't explain why his mother had defended her, or why Margaret looked terrified when Vivian spoke. The progress bar reached 28%. Then a phone vibrated. Vivian glanced down, only briefly. Nathaniel noticed that too. She locked the screen immediately. "Anything important?" he asked. "No." She smiled, the same calm smile she always wore. Yet something about it felt rehearsed now, like a mask he had never thought to question. 41%, 50, 62. Then suddenly the recovery process stopped. An error message appeared. "Archive file corrupt." Paul exhaled sharply. There Nathaniel looked at the screen. "That's convenient." Paul's face reddened. "Sir, I'm telling you the truth." "Are you?" Before Paul could answer, another voice spoke from the doorway, an older woman wearing a housekeeping uniform. "That's not possible." Everyone turned. The woman froze. She clearly hadn't expected all eyes to land on her. Nathaniel recognized her vaguely. "Your name?" "Ruth." She looked nervous. "Ruth Henderson." "Why are you here?" Ruth glanced at Elena. Then at Vivian. Fear crossed her face. Real fear. The kind people carried when speaking might cost them everything. Finally she took a breath. "Because I backed up that camera myself." The room froze. Paul stood abruptly. "You had no authorization, you told me to," Ruth interrupted. His expression changed instantly. Nathaniel saw it, and so did everyone else. Ruth continued. The side hallway camera kept malfunctioning after a storm. Her hands trembled. "I copied the footage onto a separate archive because Mr. Wexler said he didn't want to lose important recordings." Nathaniel's pulse quickened. "Where is that archive?" "I don't know." Paul took a step forward. Because it doesn't exist. No. Ruth shook her head immediately. It does. Then where is it? She hesitated, and that hesitation told Nathaniel everything. Someone had frightened her. Someone had made her afraid to speak. Nathaniel stepped between them. Ruth, his voice softened. Look at me. She did. I need the truth. Tears filled her eyes. For months I stayed quiet because I needed this job. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 2 days ago, Ruth whispered, someone came into the security office after midnight. Paul's face went pale. I saw them remove a storage drive. The room seemed to tilt. Nathaniel stared at her. Who? Ruth looked directly toward Vivian, but before she could answer, the security room door suddenly opened. A nurse rushed inside, out of breath, panicked. Mr. Cross, she said, your mother is gone. Nathaniel moved before anyone else. What do you mean she's gone? The nurse was breathing hard. I left her room for less than 5 minutes. When I came back, the wheelchair was empty. The security room erupted into overlapping voices. Paul immediately reached for his radio. Vivian looked stunned, too stunned. Nathaniel couldn't tell whether it was genuine or not. Only Elena remained silent. Her face had drained of color. Margaret had been frightened all day, fragile, struggling to communicate. The thought of her wandering alone through the estate made Nathaniel's stomach tighten. Lock the gates, he ordered. Paul nodded quickly. Already doing it. Search every building. Yes, sir. Within minutes, the estate became a controlled storm. Security teams moved across the property. Housekeepers checked storage rooms and guest suites. Garden staff searched walking paths. Nathaniel headed directly toward his mother's wing. Elena followed. One guard moved to stop her. Nathaniel didn't even slow down. She comes with me. The guard stepped aside. Vivian caught up to them halfway down the corridor. Nathaniel, maybe Elena should stay where we can monitor her. Nathaniel stopped. For the first time in years, he looked at his sister and felt uncertainty. Not suspicion, not yet, just uncertainty. Mom trusted her. Vivian's expression tightened. Mom trusts a lot of people. Not like that. For a second, neither spoke. Then Vivian looked away first. The room Margaret had occupied felt strangely cold. The bed remained untouched. A blanket had slipped partially onto the floor. One drawer stood open. Nathaniel immediately noticed that. Who searched this room? The nurse shook her head. No one. Nathaniel crossed the room. Inside the open drawer were hospital papers. Medication schedules, discharge instructions, insurance forms, nothing unusual, until he noticed empty space, a rectangular shape in the dust. Something had been removed recently. What was here? Nobody knew. Elena stared at the drawer. Then something flickered across her face. Recognition. You've seen it before. Nathaniel turned toward her. Elena hesitated, then nodded. There was a folder. What kind of folder? Brown. Not much help. But she continued. Mrs. Cross kept it hidden under the medical papers. Vivian immediately stepped forward. My mother keeps dozens of folders. Elena looked directly at her. No. The answer came softly. But she kept checking this one. Silence. Nathaniel crouched beside the drawer. The empty rectangle suddenly felt important. Very important. Why didn't you tell anyone? Elena lowered her eyes. Because it wasn't my business. The words hit harder than she intended. Nathaniel thought about the estate, the employees, the invisible lines between people with power and people without it. Rich families expected loyalty. They rarely offered trust. A maid noticing something unusual wasn't expected to speak. She was expected to stay invisible. And maybe that was exactly why nobody had listened before. A call came over Paul's radio. Main greenhouse clear. Another voice followed. South guest house clear. Nothing. No sign of Margaret. An hour passed, then another. The search expanded beyond the estate. Hospitals were contacted. Nearby stores checked security footage. Local police were quietly notified. Still nothing. As evening approached, Nathaniel returned to the security office. Ruth sat alone waiting. She looked terrified. Nathaniel closed the door behind him. No one else. Ruth nodded nervously. You wanted to tell us who removed that drive. She twisted her hands together. If I talk, I'll lose everything. Nathaniel sat across from her. You'll have my protection. A bitter smile crossed her face. Rich people always say that. The honesty surprised him, because she wasn't wrong. Promises were easy when you owned companies, much harder when you cleaned floors. Nathaniel took a breath. I mean it. Ruth studied him for several seconds. Then she reached into her handbag. His pulse quickened. She removed a small flash drive, not the missing archive. Something else. I copied one file. Nathaniel stared. When? The night I saw someone enter the security office. You have it? Ruth nodded. I didn't trust what I saw. For the first time all day, Nathaniel felt hope. Tiny, dangerous, but real. He connected the drive to a computer. The file opened, a still image appeared. Timestamp, 1:43 in the morning. Security office. A person standing near the archive cabinet, face partially obscured. The image quality was poor, yet one detail stood out immediately, a distinctive bracelet. Gold, elegant. Nathaniel recognized it. His chest tightened. It belonged to Vivian. Ruth saw his expression. I told you someone removed the drive. Nathaniel stared at the screen. The image wasn't enough, not proof, not yet, but it changed everything. Because for the first time, the possibility became real. What if Elena had been telling the truth? What if his mother had been trying to warn him? A knock interrupted the silence. The door opened. Elena stepped inside. She looked exhausted, more exhausted than ever. But there was urgency in her eyes. Mr. Cross. Nathaniel turned. What is it? She held something in her hand, a folded piece of paper, yellowed, creased, old. I found this. Where? In Mrs. Cross's wheelchair cushion. Nathaniel took it carefully. The paper looked fragile, like it had been hidden for years, not days, years. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. Inside were only 3 shaky handwritten words. Ask St. Agnes. The room fell silent. Ruth frowned. Eleanor looked confused. Nathaniel stared at the note. He had never heard the name before. But somehow he already knew one thing. This wasn't about a stolen bracelet. It wasn't about a maid, and it wasn't about a missing security file. Somewhere inside his family's past there was a secret Margaret Cross had spent years trying to protect. And tonight she had disappeared right before someone finally started listening. Nathaniel barely slept. The note remained on his desk long after midnight. Ask St. Agnes. 3 words, nothing more. Yet they felt heavier than everything else that had happened that day. The missing security footage, the hospital bracelet, the hidden drive, his mother's disappearance. None of it made sense. But somehow St. Agnes sat at the center of it all. At sunrise his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown Charleston number. Nathaniel answered immediately. Mr. Cross? An older male voice. Careful, nervous. Yes, my name is Arthur Green. I used to manage records for St. Agnes. Nathaniel sat upright. Every trace of sleep vanished. How did you get this number? Someone contacted me last night. Who? The man hesitated. I think you already know. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. Was it my mother? Silence, then yes. The answer hit harder than expected. Margaret was alive. She had disappeared voluntarily. At least for now. Nathaniel stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the estate looked peaceful. Nothing about it reflected the chaos underneath. Where is she? I don't know. The answer sounded genuine. But she asked me to tell you something. Nathaniel listened. Do not trust the records inside the house. A chill moved through him. Arthur continued. She also said if anything happened to her, you should request the St. Agnes archive through legal channels. Not family channels, family channels. Nathaniel immediately thought of Vivian. Why? You'll have to see for yourself. The line disconnected. Nathaniel stood frozen. Then he called his attorney. Within an hour, legal requests were already being prepared. Not through the family foundation. Not through estate staff. Independent requests. Independent investigators. Independent records access. For the first time in years, Nathaniel deliberately moved outside the system Vivian controlled. The decision felt small, but it wasn't. It was the first time he had chosen truth over comfort. Later that morning, he found Elena sitting alone behind the estate's maintenance building. She looked exhausted. The events of the previous day had spread through the staff. People stared, whispered, avoided her. Not because she had been proven guilty, because suspicion left stains, even when it wasn't deserved. A paper cup sat beside her, untouched coffee cold. Nathaniel approached carefully. She immediately stood, as if expecting another accusation. You don't have to do that. What? Stand every time I walk over. Elena looked away. Old habits, people in her position learned them early. Nathaniel sat on a nearby bench. For several moments neither spoke. Finally he asked, how long have you worked here? 11 months. Care facilities. Cleaning contracts. Temporary placements. Her answers remained short, guarded. Nathaniel understood why. Trust wasn't built overnight, especially not after what had happened. Then Elena surprised him. Did you find your mother? The question carried genuine concern, not calculation, not self-interest, concern. Nathaniel shook his head. No. She looked down. I hope she's safe. He studied her face. Tired, worried, completely unaware of the storm gathering around her. Why do you care so much about her? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Elena smiled sadly. Because she cared about me. Simple. Nothing dramatic. But it struck him harder than expected. Because he couldn't remember the last time someone described his mother that way. Not her money. Not her status. Her kindness. That was what Elena remembered. His phone vibrated. A message from his attorney. Urgent. Call immediately. Nathaniel stepped away and returned the call. The attorney sounded unsettled. We found St. Agnes. What do you mean? The organization closed years ago. Nathaniel frowned. That much I expected. No. The attorney paused. There's more. A stack of archived records had survived. Most had been transferred to a church administrative annex outside Columbia. The problem wasn't access. The problem was what someone had already done. Several files were removed. Nathaniel's stomach tightened. When? Last month. The timing landed like a punch. Last month, before the bracelet, before the accusations, before his arrival, someone had already been preparing. Do we know which files? Not yet, but we know who paid for access. Nathaniel stopped walking, silence stretched between them. Then he asked quietly, Who? The attorney answered, Vivian Cross. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Not proof, still not proof, but another piece, another crack, another question. Why would Vivian secretly access records from a closed foster care agency? Hours later, Nathaniel drove alone to Charleston Memorial Hospital. Not for Margaret, for Mateo, Elena's brother. The hospital room was small, plain, the kind reserved for patients without influence. Mateo looked older than his records suggested. Chronic illness had worn him down, yet his eyes were sharp, protective. When Nathaniel introduced himself, Mateo laughed weakly. The billionaire. Nathaniel almost smiled. That's me. Mateo studied him carefully. Why are you here? Nathaniel answered honestly. Because I think people have been lying to me. That earned respect, small, but real. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Most of it centered on Elena, how hard she worked, how many jobs she carried, how often she sacrificed her own health. Then Mateo mentioned something unexpected. There was one thing that scared her. Nathaniel immediately leaned forward. What? Mateo hesitated. About 3 weeks ago, Nathaniel's attention sharpened. 3 weeks, the same timeline again. Go on. She found something while cleaning. What? A sealed envelope. Nathaniel felt his pulse quicken. Where? In Mrs. Cross's room. The hospital suddenly seemed quieter. Mateo continued. She said she'd never seen her so upset. Upset how? She was shaking. Nathaniel frowned. Did she open it? No. Mateo shook his head. She said Mrs. Cross saw it and practically begged her not to tell anyone. The words landed heavily. Did she say what was inside? Mateo nodded slowly. Yes. Nathaniel waited. The room felt impossibly still. Then Mateo spoke. A photograph. Nathaniel blinked. A photograph? Yes. Mateo looked directly at him. She said the photo showed your mother standing beside another woman. Nathaniel frowned. Nothing strange about that, until Mateo finished, and both women were wearing the exact same silver locket. The same locket, the one that would later appear in the records. The same symbol connected to a past nobody wanted discussed. Nathaniel stared at him. Every answer seemed to create 2 more questions. And somewhere out there his missing mother had already begun pointing him toward them. Nathaniel drove back to the estate with Mateo's words echoing in his head. A photograph. 2 women. Matching silver lockets. And Margaret had been terrified someone would find it. The deeper he went, the less this felt like a dispute over a maid or a missing bracelet. Someone had been protecting a secret for years, maybe decades, and someone else had been trying desperately to keep it buried. When he arrived, the atmosphere inside the Cross estate had changed again. The search for Margaret had officially ended, not because they had found her, because she had called. The news came from Vivian. She met him in the main library, where several legal advisors and foundation administrators sat around a long conference table. She contacted her doctor. Nathaniel froze. She what? Vivian folded her hands calmly. She's safe. Relief hit first, then anger. Where is she? She wouldn't say. Nathaniel stared at her. She wouldn't tell her own family where she is? No. The answer came from Margaret's physician doctor, Leonard Graves. The older man looked uncomfortable. She only wanted us to know she left voluntarily. Nathaniel felt something tighten inside his chest. Why? Nobody answered immediately. Then Dr. Graves looked down. She said she needed time before people started asking the wrong questions. Silence settled over the room. Nathaniel noticed Vivian watching him carefully, measuring him, trying to understand what he knew, or what he suspected. The realization disturbed him, because until recently he would never have imagined thinking that way about his own sister. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel locked himself inside his father's old study. He needed distance, space, a place where nobody could shape his thoughts. The study had barely changed in 15 years. Dark shelves, leather chairs, family photographs, old records. The room smelled faintly of dust and cedar wood. His father had spent countless evenings there reviewing contracts and foundation reports. Nathaniel suddenly wondered how many secrets those walls had witnessed. His attorney called shortly after sunset. "I have something." Nathaniel immediately sat up. "What kind of something?" "The archive request." Nathaniel waited. The church annex located several surviving St. Agnes records. His pulse quickened, finally. "But there are restrictions." Of course there were. Nothing about this investigation had been simple. "The files are sealed." Nathaniel closed his eyes. "Can we access them?" "Possibly." The attorney hesitated. "However, there is another issue." Nathaniel had learned to hate those words. "What issue?" "The records indicate someone already requested access multiple times over the last 5 years. Nathaniel wasn't surprised anymore. Vivian paused. "Margaret." That answer stunned him. "Margaret?" "Yes, not once, not twice." Repeated requests, repeated denials. Nathaniel sat in silence. His mother had spent years trying to access something important enough to continue pursuing despite legal barriers, important enough to hide, important enough to disappear over. "Anything else?" "Yes." The attorney's voice lowered. "One request included a handwritten note." Nathaniel's grip tightened. "What did it say?" A pause. "Then I am searching for my daughter." Everything inside Nathaniel stopped. For several seconds he forgot to breathe. His daughter, not granddaughter, not niece, daughter. The room seemed strangely quiet. His mother had never mentioned another child. Never, not once. Nathaniel stood abruptly and crossed the room. His reflection appeared faintly in the dark window. A billionaire. A son. A man who suddenly realized there might be an entire chapter of his mother's life he knew nothing about. "Are we sure? The note is authentic." Nathaniel rubbed his forehead. His thoughts raced. If Margaret had a daughter, who was she? Where was she? Why had nobody ever spoken about her? And why did St. Agnes keep appearing? Another question emerged, one he couldn't ignore. What if Elena wasn't connected to the fraud at all? What if she had simply stumbled into something bigger? The possibility refused to leave him. Hours later, unable to sit still any longer, Nathaniel left the study. The house was quiet. Most staff had gone home. Only a few lights remained on. As he passed the rear hallway, he noticed movement in the kitchen. Elena. She stood alone washing dishes, long after her shift should have ended. Nathaniel stepped inside. She looked startled. "Mr. Cross, you should be home." A small smile appeared. "Bills don't care what time it is." The honesty caught him off guard. Again. She dried her hands slowly. "Did they find your mother?" "No," he hesitated. "Not exactly." Concern crossed her face immediately, not curiosity. Concern. Nathaniel noticed the difference. She contacted her doctor. Relief flooded her features. For the first time all day, she looked lighter. She must be safe then. Nathaniel studied her. Most people would have focused on themselves after what happened. The accusations, the suspicion, the whispers. Yet Elena's first reaction remained concern for Margaret. The observation lingered. Before he could speak again, her phone vibrated. She glanced down, and immediately went pale. Nathaniel noticed, What's wrong?" Elena looked away. "Nothing, it was obviously something." A second later, the phone vibrated again. Same number, unknown caller. Fear flashed across her face. Real fear. Nathaniel saw it. "Answer it." She hesitated, then reluctantly accepted the call. Nobody spoke from the other end, only silence, then a whisper, too faint for Nathaniel to hear. Elena's eyes widened. "What?" Silence, then the line disconnected. The phone slipped slightly in her hand. Nathaniel stepped forward. "Who was that?" Elena swallowed. "I don't know, but she did, or at least she suspected he could see it." "Tell me." Her voice trembled. "They said my name." Nathaniel waited. "They said I need to stop asking questions." The kitchen suddenly felt colder. "Anything else?" She nodded slowly. Her face had lost all color. "Yes." Nathaniel's pulse quickened. "What?" For a moment she couldn't answer. Then she reached into her pocket, her fingers closed around something, a small silver object, the same object she had kept hidden since the beginning. A locket, one Nathaniel had never seen before. Elena stared at it, then looked up. They said if I want to know who gave me this, her voice broke. I should stop looking for the woman in the photograph. The room went completely silent. Nathaniel stared at the silver locket, and for the first time he realized Elena might not merely be connected to his mother's secret. She might be the reason someone was willing to threaten people to keep it hidden. Nathaniel stared at the silver locket resting in Elena's palm. The kitchen lights reflected off its worn surface. It was old, not expensive, not something anyone would kill for. Yet people were threatening her over it. That fact alone made it valuable, not in money. In truth, have you ever opened it? Nathaniel asked quietly. Elena shook her head. It doesn't open. She handed it to him. The metal felt surprisingly heavy. Years of wear had softened its edges. On the back, faint initials were engraved. MC. Nathaniel's breath caught. Margaret Cross. The same initials, the same ones Matteo had mentioned. For a moment neither spoke. Then Elena looked away. Maybe it's a coincidence. Nathaniel didn't believe that, neither did she. They both knew it. The only question was what it meant. The next morning began with lawyers, not investigators, not police, lawyers, which somehow felt more dangerous. Nathaniel sat inside a conference room overlooking downtown Charleston while his legal team reviewed documents from St. Agnes. Every page seemed designed to reveal as little as possible. Redactions, missing names, sealed records, destroyed archives, decades-old privacy protections, a maze of locked doors. His attorney slid a folder across the table. We received partial access. Nathaniel opened it immediately. Inside were administrative records, transfer forms, funding reports, nothing personal, nothing direct. Then one page stopped him, a donor ledger. His eyes narrowed. Cross Family Foundation. Repeated donations year after year, for nearly 20 years. Nathaniel frowned. He had never known the foundation supported St. Agnes. Who approved these? The attorney adjusted his glasses. Most were signed before your father passed away. Nathaniel nodded slowly. That part wasn't surprising. His father had donated to dozens of charities. Then the attorney pointed lower on the page. These are newer. Nathaniel followed his finger. Several payments had occurred within the last 6 years, after his father's death, after Vivian took operational control of much of the family foundation. The signatures belonged to her. His stomach tightened. Purpose? No explanation listed. Nathaniel stared at the records. More money, more secrecy, more connections to St. Agnes. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Hours later he drove directly to the church annex housing the remaining archive records. The building looked ordinary. Old brick, simple windows, a faded sign near the entrance. Nothing about it suggested hidden family histories. Inside, an elderly records clerk greeted him cautiously. The moment Nathaniel introduced himself, the woman's expression changed. Recognition. Not admiration, recognition. You're another Cross? Another. The word lingered. Another? The clerk immediately looked uncomfortable. I shouldn't have said that. Nathaniel leaned forward. You've seen my family here before. Silence. Then a reluctant nod. Yes. Vivian? Yes. Nathaniel expected that answer. What was she looking for? The woman hesitated. Legal restrictions still mattered. Even now, I can't disclose private requests. Nathaniel accepted that. But he asked something different. Was she searching for financial records? The clerk shook her head. No. Property records? No. The woman lowered her voice. She wanted family files. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. Family files, not business. Not charity family. Did she find them? The clerk looked away. I don't know. The answer felt incomplete. Not false, incomplete. There was a difference. Nathaniel left with more questions than answers. But as he reached his car, his phone rang. His attorney again. This time the urgency was unmistakable. We found the removed file. Nathaniel froze. What one of them? His heartbeat accelerated. Where? It was logged before removal. Nathaniel opened the car door and sat down. What? A pause, then a placement record. Nathaniel frowned. A placement record? Yes. The attorney's voice remained careful. An adult adoption placement transferred through St. Agnes decades ago. The words landed heavily. Nathaniel immediately thought of Margaret's note. I am searching for my daughter. His grip tightened around the phone. Do we have names? No, why not? Because the identifying page was removed. Of course it was. Another dead end, another missing piece. Then the attorney added something else. However, the file reference number survived. Nathaniel listened carefully. The same reference number appears in a hospital archive request submitted by Margaret 4 years ago. Nathaniel closed his eyes. His mother, again, always his mother, searching, requesting, trying. Someone had spent years looking for the truth. Someone else had spent years burying it. That evening, Elena finished her shift early. Nathaniel insisted on having security escort her home. She hated the idea, not because she felt safe, because she didn't want charity or special treatment. But after the threatening call, she reluctantly agreed. The apartment building looked exactly as it always had. Old, crowded, ordinary, nothing about it connected to billionaires or hidden inheritances. Yet somehow the center of the mystery kept leading back there. As Elena entered the lobby, the building manager approached nervously. "Someone left this for you. A large envelope, no return address, no postage, just her name." Elena immediately felt cold. The manager noticed. "You okay?" She nodded, but she wasn't, not even close. She carried the envelope upstairs without opening it. When Nathaniel arrived a short time later, she was still staring at it. "Who sent it?" "I don't know." "Open it." For several seconds neither moved. Then Elena carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single photograph, nothing else, no letter, no threat, just a photograph. Nathaniel took it first, his breath stopped. The image was old, at least 30 years old, perhaps more. A younger Margaret stood beside another woman, both smiling, both wearing identical silver lockets, exactly as Matteo had described, but that wasn't what shocked him, not anymore. It was the second woman's face. Elena stepped closer, then froze. The room seemed to tilt around her, because the woman beside Margaret looked almost exactly like her, not identical. Older, different hairstyle, different era, but unmistakably connected. Elena slowly lowered herself into a chair. Her hands trembled. "Who is she?" Nathaniel couldn't answer, because he didn't know. But for the first time, the mystery had a face, a real person. Then something slipped from the back of the photograph, a folded document, hidden between the layers of old paper. Nathaniel unfolded it carefully, his pulse hammered. The page was incomplete, torn, a photocopy from some forgotten file. Most of the text was missing. But one surviving line remained perfectly readable. "Biological mother." Margaret crossed the room, fell silent. Neither of them moved, neither of them spoke, because somewhere out there existed the missing half of that document, and whoever had torn it apart had known exactly what they were trying to hide. The room remained silent long after Nathaniel lowered the torn document. Biological mother, Margaret Cross. Nothing else, no name, no date, no explanation. Just enough truth to destroy every version of the past he had trusted. Elena sat motionless. The photograph remained in her lap. Her eyes never left the woman standing beside Margaret. The resemblance was impossible to ignore now. Not exact, but undeniable. A familiar jawline, the same eyes, the same shape of her smile. For years, Elena had lived without answers. Now she had a fragment, and somehow that fragment hurt more than the uncertainty. Nathaniel carefully slipped the document into an evidence envelope. "I'm keeping this." Elena nodded. Neither argued. Both understood the stakes had changed. Someone had removed records, someone had sent threats, someone had hidden evidence, and now someone had anonymously delivered proof. The question was why. Whoever sent the photograph wanted them to know something, but not everything, not yet. The next morning, Nathaniel made a decision. For the first time since returning to Charleston, he stopped trying to solve the mystery quietly. He hired a forensic document specialist, a private investigator, and an independent genealogical attorney. If there was a family secret buried inside legal archives, he intended to uncover it properly. No shortcuts, no assumptions, no emotional guesses. Facts, only facts. The reaction inside the Cross estate was immediate. Vivian found him reviewing contracts in the study. "You hired outside investigators?" Nathaniel looked up calmly. "Yes." "Why?" The question came too quickly, too sharply. Nathaniel noticed. "Because someone is threatening people." Vivian folded her arms. "Or because someone is manipulating you." The room grew still. For months, Nathaniel would have accepted that possibility without question. Now he wasn't so sure. "Are you talking about Elena?" Vivian's expression barely changed. She appeared. Suddenly everything became complicated. Nathaniel watched her carefully. Maybe things were already complicated. A flicker crossed her face. Gone almost instantly, but he saw it. The conversation ended politely, yet both walked away knowing something fundamental had shifted. Trust. Once cracked, it never sounded the same again. Later that afternoon, another piece arrived. Not from investigators. From Margaret, a handwritten letter, delivered through her attorney. The envelope was addressed only to Nathaniel. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The handwriting was weak, uneven, but unmistakably hers. Nathaniel, if you are reading this, it means events are moving faster than I hoped. I need you to listen carefully. There are things your father never knew, and things Vivian discovered long before you did. Do not hate her too quickly. Fear changes people, especially when they believe they are protecting what belongs to them. I tried for years to fix a mistake I made as a young woman. I was too late, then I was too afraid, and eventually I became ashamed. If Elena is involved, protect her until the truth is verified. Do not ask her for forgiveness if she learns what I failed to do. She owes none of us that. Love. Mother. Nathaniel read the letter twice, then a third time. One sentence lingered. There are things Vivian discovered long before you did, not suspected, not feared, discovered. The wording mattered. It suggested knowledge, not guesswork. He immediately forwarded the letter to his attorney. Then he made another decision. He called Eleanor. I need to show you something. An hour later they sat together in a conference room belonging to Nathaniel's legal team. Neutral territory. No family estate, no staff, no pressure. Elena read Margaret's letter quietly. When she finished, her eyes glistened, not with joy, with grief. The grief of realizing someone had been searching for answers while simultaneously failing to tell the truth. Do you think she knew? Nathaniel asked. Elisa stared at the letter. Yes. The answer came immediately. You do? She knew something. Elena folded the paper carefully. People don't write letters like this unless they're carrying guilt. Nathaniel couldn't argue, because he felt the same thing. The door opened. Both looked up. Nathaniel's attorney entered carrying a thick folder. For once the older man looked shaken. Not excited. Shaken. We found something. The room immediately tightened. What? The attorney placed several documents on the table. These came from a hospital archive connected to St. Agnes. Nathaniel leaned forward. Go on. The original placement file was partially destroyed. Not surprising, but a secondary medical archive survived. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. Whose archive? A hospital social services department. The attorney opened a page. Several names had been redacted. Dates remained. Reference numbers remained. One physician's signature remained, and one notation he pointed directly to it. Nathaniel read silently, then again. The words felt impossible. Client request reunification search. Search terminated after intervention by family representative. Nathaniel looked up. What family representative? The attorney shook his head. The name is missing. Removed? Yes. Silence settled across the room. Elena stared at the page. Someone had stopped the search. Not government agencies, not privacy laws. A family representative. Someone close enough to intervene. Someone connected enough to succeed. Nathaniel already knew the question neither wanted to ask. Was it Vivian? Or someone before her? Hours later, the private investigator called. His voice carried unusual urgency. Mr. Cross. Nathaniel immediately stepped away from the others. What happened? I located the physician who signed part of the surviving file. Nathaniel froze. The doctor was alive, after all these years. Can we speak with him? Yes. Then, there's a problem. Nathaniel's stomach tightened. What problem? He agreed to talk. Relief started, then vanished. Then what's wrong? The investigator exhaled slowly. Someone got to him first. The words landed like a hammer. Nathaniel's grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean? He says a woman visited him 2 weeks ago. Everything inside Nathaniel went cold. Who? The investigator answered immediately. Vivian Cross. Silence. Long, heavy. Then the investigator added one final detail. A detail that changed everything. And according to the doctor, she wasn't asking whether Elena might be connected to your family. Nathaniel's heart pounded. She already believed she was. The call ended. Nathaniel slowly lowered the phone. Across the room, Elena looked up. She knew from his face that something had changed. Something important, something dangerous, and for the first time, Nathaniel realized the real mystery was no longer whether Elena was connected to Margaret. The real mystery was how long Vivian had known. The truth came out slowly, Not through a dramatic confession, not through a single document, through months of investigation, financial audits, court filings, hospital records, archived correspondence. Every piece told part of the same story. Vivian had discovered the truth years earlier. She had learned that Margaret's long search through St. Agnes was not about charity work or old donations. It was about a daughter Margaret never stopped looking for. Instead of helping, Vivian chose silence, at first out of fear, then out of self-interest, and eventually out of habit. The investigations uncovered more. Foundation funds had been redirected through consulting accounts connected to Paul Wexler and several shell contractors. Margaret's signature appeared on documents she had never seen. Medical evaluations had been selectively presented to make her seem less capable of making decisions. When questions arose, her declining health became a convenient shield. By the time the evidence reached state investigators, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Vivian had not created every lie, but she had protected them, and she had benefited from them. Paul eventually cooperated. Faced with criminal exposure, he turned over internal emails, deleted security logs, and records showing how surveillance footage had been removed from estate archives. He confirmed the threats against Elena. He confirmed the attempts to discourage inquiries into St. Agnes. And he confirmed something Nathaniel had suspected for a long time. Vivian knew Elena mattered before Elena ever knew it herself. The legal consequences were not immediate. They rarely were. But they came. Vivian lost control of the foundation. She lost authority over Margaret's care decisions. Civil and criminal investigations continued. Her public reputation, carefully protected for years, collapsed under scrutiny. The hardest consequence, however, was neither financial nor legal. It was personal. Margaret refused to see her for a long time. Not out of hatred, out of heartbreak, because some betrayals came from strangers, others came from family. Nathaniel made a choice of his own. The easiest path would have been silence. Protect the family name, protect the company, protect the headlines. For years, that was exactly what he would have done. This time he didn't. He turned over everything investigators requested. Every record, every email, every report. Then he stepped away from public control of the foundation until the investigations were complete. The decision cost him. Shareholders questioned him. Reporters followed him. Business analysts criticized him. But for the first time in a long time, Nathaniel stopped measuring every decision by what it protected. He started measuring it by what it repaired. Elena's name was eventually cleared in full. The public statement issued by the foundation was simple and direct. She had committed no theft, no misconduct, no abuse. The accusations had been false. The words could not erase what happened. They could not erase whispers, or humiliation, or the nights she spent wondering whether anyone would ever believe her. But they restored something important. Her dignity. She accepted no special payout, no symbolic reward, no public ceremony, only the truth. Mateo's treatment continued through an independent patient assistance program managed by a regional hospital network. Nathaniel deliberately kept himself separate from the process. Elena had made her position clear. Help was welcome, control was not. He respected that. Margaret eventually chose to move into a smaller private care residence overlooking the coast. Not because she needed to be hidden, because she wanted peace. For the first time in years, her daily schedule belonged to her. No board meetings, no family battles, no documents pushed in front of her for signatures, only nurses she trusted, doctors she chose, and visitors she welcomed. Some afternoons she invited Nathaniel, some afternoons she invited Elena, occasionally both. The first time the three of them sat together after the investigations ended, nobody knew what to say. The garden was quiet, ocean air drifted through flowering hedges. Margaret sat wrapped in a light blanket, older, frail, but lighter somehow. Like a weight she had carried for decades had finally begun to loosen. Nathaniel broke the silence first. "I should have listened sooner." Margaret looked at him gently. "You weren't the only one." But Nathaniel shook his head. No, his voice remained steady. "I thought sending money was the same as being present." The admission hung in the air, painful because it was true. He looked toward Elena. "I judged you before I knew anything about you." Elena listened quietly. "I trusted the wrong people." Still she said nothing. Nathaniel nodded. "You don't owe me forgiveness." For a moment only the sound of distant waves filled the space. Then Elena finally spoke. I know. There was no anger in her voice, but no easy absolution either. And somehow that honesty felt healthier than any dramatic reconciliation. Margaret reached for Elena's hand, then for Nathaniel's, holding both, not forcing them together, simply holding both, as if acknowledging what existed without demanding what did not. Weeks later, another document arrived, official, verified, final. The completed legal findings and supporting records confirmed what the evidence had already shown. Elena was Margaret's biological daughter, the daughter Margaret had searched for through years of sealed records, dead ends, and institutional barriers. The daughter who had unknowingly walked into the Cross estate as a maid, not as an heir, not as a claimant, not even searching for family, only looking for work. When Nathaniel brought the documents to her, she read them quietly, then placed them back inside the folder. You don't seem surprised. Elena smiled faintly. I think part of me already knew. Does this change anything? She thought about that for a long time, then looked toward the ocean. It changes the truth. Nathaniel waited. It doesn't erase the years. The answer was honest and enough. Month later, the three of them sat together in the same garden. No reporters, no investigators, no lawyers, no secrets. The wounds had not disappeared, some never would, but the lies were gone, and sometimes that was where healing began. Nathaniel looked across the lawn toward the distant sky. Years earlier, his private jet had carried him home, believing success had solved every important problem. Instead, it had destroyed everything he thought he knew. And in doing so, it had given him something far more valuable. The truth. If this story stayed with you, remember the people who serve quietly, suffer quietly, and still choose kindness. Sometimes the family we almost lose is the one truth was trying to bring back.